Leftists are starting to panic. It's rather obvious from what they're saying about the Arizona audit. In this video, we're taking a look at the latest, shall we say, conspiracy theory being pushed by left-wing activists disguised as journalists. You're going to have the opportunity to tell us exactly what you think in the comments section below. And stick with me to the very end of this video when I give the big reveal of what's really freaking out the left. You're not going to want to miss this. Greetings, everyone. Dr. Steve here with you. Wonderful to be with you. As always, we are your daily fake news antidote. As each and every day, I provide patriotic analysis to help you to think better so you can feel better in these crazy and turbulent times. So if you haven't already done so, you know what to do. Make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. Before we jump into things here, let's give a huge shout out to the sponsor of this video, and that's the makers of this awesome, totally cool, beautiful fighter flare flashlight. You're going to love this one. One of the best things that you can invest in for your protection when the lights go out is this 6-in-1 beauty, which comes with a 3000 mAh solar-powered recharging battery. It's equipped with a high and low beam light that you can see from miles away. It's got an emergency strobe light. It's got a compass. It's got a wire and rope cutter. It's got an emergency glass breaker hammer and a high-powered military-grade magnet. It is absolutely awesome. And best of all, if you click on the link below right now, you're going to get 20% off the regular price, but supply is limited, so do not wait. Click on that link below and get your super awesome fighter flare flashlight today. All right, gang, let's dive right in here. As the fallout from last week's Arizona Senate hearing on the Maricopa County audit continues to work its way through the left-wing activists disguised as journalists in the mainstream media, it is becoming clear that at least some of these so-called reporters are starting to get it, or at least they think they do. According to them, they're discerning a highly thought-out strategy behind these audits that goes way beyond simply determining the veracity of election results. No. These journos are realizing there's a far more sinister strategy at work here, and more importantly, they're realizing that it's working. The strategy is indeed being successfully implemented, and the desired effect by pro-Trump forces is being realized. Now, my case in point is an article from the far-left activists over at Salon, and it's entitled, "The Fake Arizona Audit is Confusing, Idiotic, and Endless," which means it's working as intended. And take a look at the byline, which reads, "Trump and his allies are building the foundation for the 2024 coup effort by sowing more confusion about voting now." So Trump and his minions in Arizona are launching a coup. Now, this is fast becoming a refrain among leftist activists disguised as journalists. You definitely want to check out my video on CNN's Jim Acosta accusing Trump of launching what he calls a slow motion coup. Yes, Acosta believes that Trump is actively engaged in a coup. And it's actually an interesting argument, even though the conclusion he draws is rather absurd. But this article from Salon is arguing something very similar to the borderline illiterate Jim Acosta. And I gotta say, I think this article is a fantastic example of how two groups of people can see the same evidence and yet come to radically different conclusions as to what's really going on, right? Salon reporters, or so-called reporters, they see quite literally the same things we're seeing, but they see the events through the prism of a radically different worldview, a radically different meta-narrative than what characterizes patriots who love and revere faith, family, and freedom. So let me unpack that a bit for you, because I actually think it's a very fascinating case study in how a leftist worldview thinks. So this writer for Salon zeroes in on a recent comment made by Alan Dershowitz on the Sean Hannity show, where he said, quote, "We have to move forward to make sure that future elections have transparency. It's a very unhealthy thing in a democracy if 30 million, 50 million people don't trust the outcome of an election." Now, you would think that what Dershowitz just said there was perfectly reasonable, isn't it? I mean, elections ought to be transparent, shouldn't they? I mean, what's the opposite of transparent? I mean, pick your antonym. Cloudy, nebulous, murky, right? Find your favorite antonym. So elections need to be transparent. Of course they do. Who would have an issue with that? Well, apparently the leftist activists over at Salon, that's who. This writer commented on Dershowitz's rather reasonable observation by saying this, quote, "Transparency is, of course, Trumpist code for sowing doubt and confusion about the election results, creating a pretext for Republican election officials and judges to simply vacate any election results they dislike."
What you talking about? What you talking about? What you talking about? What you talking about, Willis?
Yeah, I know. Calls for transparency in our elections are now, according to leftists like this one at Salon, they are now a code. They're code for sowing doubt and confusion about election results, which the last time I looked is the complete opposite of transparency. So when Alan Dershowitz or anyone else associated with Trump calls for election transparency, they're actually calling for non-transparency. And then that creates a pretext for Republican election officials, whoever they are, to simply vacate any election results they don't like. And it's all, in her word, obvious.
You keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Keep in mind, these are the kinds of people who are doing the weaponized fact-checking that supposedly debunks all this misinformation coming from the far radical right. The problem for this ultra-leftist narrative that's being pushed here is that it flies in the face of the fact that the vast majority of Americans believe, surprise, surprise, that election transparency is a good thing. The latest Rasmussen poll shows overwhelming support for election integrity bills. According to the survey, 61% of likely voters agree with the statement made by President Trump last week on his website, quote, "Election reform must happen in swing states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Georgia, Wisconsin, and Arizona, where voters have lost confidence in their electoral process." Now, that includes 42% who strongly agree with that statement. And these numbers corroborate with what Rasmussen found back in March. 75% of likely voters support voter ID requirements. And contrary to what Democrats would have us believe, that number includes 69% of black voters. 69% of black voters and 75% of voters overall support precisely the kind of voter ID requirements that leftist activists are doing everything they possibly can to oppose. So Rasmussen is arguing that the likely voters are clearly being persuaded by Trump's argument over election integrity. But getting back to the leftists over at Salon, they think that all of this transparency talk is all a pretext to get Trump back into the White House. And that is where the coup accusations come from. This writer, according to the byline, is of course convinced that the Maricopa County audit is evidence that a 2024 coup is underway. And the supposed coup works something like this. The Republican-dominated Senate in Arizona, working together with the cyber ninjas who are conducting the audit, they make sure that the audit actually is never completed. They find new excuses for why the audit needs to continue, excuses that constantly call into question the trustworthiness of election officials, which in turn continues to amplify Trump's unrelenting bashing of the veracity of the November results, which in turn pressures more and more Republican legislators throughout the nation, a total of 30 of them, to conduct their own audits, as Georgia, Pennsylvania, Texas, and Oklahoma are about to do, as well as pass more and more restrictive election laws that all but guaranteed Trump's victory in 2024.
It's a conspiracy, man!
That's right. And if he doesn't win outright, and if the Republicans take over Congress in the 2022 midterms, which looks increasingly like it's going to be the case, then all they have to do is draw on all the doubt and confusion and obfuscation that were sowed over the past few years, all in the name of transparency, to call into question the results of the 2024 election and nullify the results they don't like. I mean, it is rather obvious, isn't it? Well, of course, there's another way of understanding what's playing out in front of us here. And I'm glad to say that it appears that the vast majority of the nation is seeing it as well. Transparency, in fact, means that. Transparency. The supposed restrictions against voting rights that the Republican legislatures are passing, which Biden claims is Jim Crow 2.0, are simply very practical and very prudent measures to ensure that cheating, not voting, is made much harder. Such measures are currently being undertaken not because of any nefarious purpose lurking underneath the surface, but rather because Democrats are doing everything they can to change the way we do elections, precisely to benefit and consolidate their own political power. As to President Trump's return in 2024, again, what we're seeing here is a president that remains extremely popular among the Republican base. In fact, he's so popular that the otherwise frontrunner, Ron DeSantis, won't even consider running if Trump officially announces his candidacy for 2024. I mean, that's simply unprecedented. Perhaps, if we think about it, perhaps all this coup talk coming from the left, perhaps that's the code. All this coup talk is code for the fact that the leftists are panicked over the Arizona audit. All this talk about the audit doing precisely what it's supposed to be doing is actually code for their fear that the audit really is exposing some bombshell revelations. Revelations that will destroy their credibility and the Democrats' credibility. In the end, it appears that the only coup that's really happening here is the coup of common sense. Now, before you go, you'll definitely want to check out my latest video. I just uploaded it on what happens if Biden is removed from office. That is precisely what pundits have been asking since that disastrous town hall this week. You're not going to want to miss it. So make sure to click on the link, and I will see you over there. God bless.